Welcome to Legacy Magazine Presents Lunch with Legacy Leaders, a weekly talk show that interviews national and local thought leaders on issues impacting the South Florida Black community. Now introducing our host, Chris Norwood.
Welcome to another episode of Lunch with Legacy Leaders. It is our pleasure to present this opportunity for you to be introduced, perhaps for the first time, to some really important leaders in our community, and of course, have lunch and enjoy a little break in the middle of the day. Our sponsors for our Lunch with Legacy Leaders is Desmondman and Dover, AARP, the Florida Lottery, FAMU, and All of Us Research. We cannot do anything without the sponsors that make it all possible. Today, we have a very, very, very special guest. So honored to have the Congresswoman representing District 20 out of Florida. Congresswoman Sheila Cherfilus-McCormick was elected to Congress in 2022, becoming the first Haitian American Democrat to be elected to Congress. She is a member of the House Education and Labor Committee, as well as the House Committee on Veteran Affairs. Ms. McCormick earned her Bachelor's of Arts degree in Political Science and Government from Howard University. We got a bison in the building. And I'm not going to make any jokes because you all know that that we call that the lowercase HU where I come from. I'm a proud graduate of Hampton University. In furtherance of her education, she did make the right choice and pursued her Juris Doctorate at St. Thomas University, affectionately known as Stu Law. I too graduated from that law school. And so we're happy to have you here, Ms. Cherfilus-McCormick.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me on today. And I wasn't aware that we had our rival over here, Hampton University. And of course, thank you so much for mentioning the illustrious Howard University. I'm really excited to be here. We're in the middle of a fierce battle in Congress. Right now is actually our moment. And I say that for every minority that lives in our district and the Black community and Black professionals who are looking to move forward. So we've been fighting a fierce fight to make sure that we have a seat at the table and that we have every opportunity to succeed.
Well, thank you very much. And so I just want to start with some general questions. What does it feel like as a freshman in a body so historic and with such power on this earth as the U.S. Congress? What does it feel like to be a freshman Congresswoman?
It's excellent. And, it's awesome. I can't find enough words to describe what it feels like to get up every day and fight the fight. It's a real fast-paced environment, and you have to really perfect your craft in the sense that when we get up there, sometimes we have 60 minutes, 1 minute to actually articulate an argument and let people actually empathize with the district and understand who we're fighting for. So once you understand what your job is and you have to condense it to 1 minute, it makes it challenging. The other thing that we do also, we have a great opportunity right now to designate certain earmarks and funding for the community to actually do the real work. And I call it the real work because when we could deliver healthcare, when we could deliver more jobs, when we can deliver assistance when it comes to immigration, and when we can deliver access to funding for your business, that's the real work of the district. So when you combine everything together, you realize that this is such a great moment for me to take part of, that I just feel overwhelmed. But I also have great mentors, such as Joyce Beatty, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and Nancy Pelosi, who recently appointed me to the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee because she said I hit the ground running. So in that vein, I thank God so much for my education at St. Thomas Law School and Howard, because all of that kind of gave me everything I needed to really hit the ground running and to bring everything together so I can understand what could be done legally and be able to articulate myself.
Well, clearly, having gone to school in Washington, D.C. gives you your bearings are at least set. You know the difference between I guess G Street and H Street and And so that clearly that was an advantage to you. As a freshman Congresswoman, you've been, inundated with a country that is going through some very interesting times. Recently, we did a show last week that was very compelling about the impact of the monumental landmark case overturning Roe v. Wade. Tell us, what is going on in Congress? What is the temperature as it relates to this? And also, what is the temperature for some sort of federal law? What's the likelihood of Nancy Pelosi putting forward a bill to deal with this issue with federal legislation?
Well, we've already seen a bill that deals with codifying Roe versus Wade on the federal level. We are going to reintroduce it and hope that it pushes through the Senate. But at the end of the day, I think everybody needs to be aware that this is a systematic fight and assault on the American people. We saw the assault start when it came to voting rights, when they were systemically trying to suppress voters throughout the entire country, especially Black voters. And we have to be clear about what their real goal was. Then we saw them attacking us also on the other front when it came to guns and killings, where we know what's behind it is white supremacists. We know white supremacists are actively recruiting children, military people, and spreading this word of hate, but then they're not wanting to sign that bill, which we actually passed in the House, in the Senate. And now when we see the attack on women, we understand that that was one of the last blows. And that blow is to divide us and make us feel demoralized. At the end of the day, this agenda is to really put the Democratic Party and especially Black people behind. They know that once we feel that we're demoralized, once we feel like our votes don't matter, we don't turn out. But the truth is that Black voters, when we turn out, we win. Anytime we had a Black candidate for president, they won. It has been our votes, and our votes equate our voice. And that's what really transforms the Black community. So Roe versus Wade is something that we are angry about, but we have a plan to make sure we can codify it. In addition to that, we hear a lot of conversations about expanding the Supreme Court. I don't believe that's the solution, because we have a bigger problem where you have members or people who are trying to be part of the Supreme Court who are taking part in a Senate hearing and lying. We need to hold them accountable instead of expanding it and having more people who feel like, if I lie, there's no accountability because I'll be in this seat forever. So we are fighting our hardest. When we get back into Congress on Tuesday, we will be picking up that legislation to make sure that we can actually provide the rights that are inherent to women to make a decision for themselves and their families. And I think a lot of people miss this. This is not just an issue for a woman, but for fathers, for husbands, that we can make a decision as a community, as a couple, for our future.
Thank you very much. We've been watching the hearings on January 6th, and as a citizen, they have been illuminating in many ways, and I'm just curious as to what have you seen, and what surprised you, what have you seen that inspired you to act in any way? I just want to know your general summation of what you've seen.
Well, what's really been frustrating and making me angry is that I did not realize the extent of white supremacy to the point where they turned it into nationalism to overthrow the government. And I think when we think about January 6th, we just see people going there. We're thinking that it was spontaneous. It was not spontaneous. It was premeditated. It was organized. And to know that members of Congress took part of that, to know that the former president took part of that, it lets us really understand who we're dealing with. There's no level that these people will go to make sure they go roll back America. And as an African-American person, we all need to know what that means. That means suppression and subjugation for us. And the advancement that they're upset about is the advancement of the Black man and the Black woman and the Black family. So let's be clear about what's going on here. And the more we dive into it, the more we hear about it, we see that it was a plot and a plan to turn over the elections. And so that to me is horrendous. And I think when you look at that in the proper perspective, when you look at it in the statements that were made from the other members, one of my first conversations I had with Congresswoman Val Demings, she described that moment and how horrifying it is. Now, if you know Val is a tough woman. She used to be chief. And she said at that moment, she was there, and the Congressional Black Caucus was looking at her, the members, like, Val, like, what are we to do? And she said she put her hand in her purse, and she said, well, she wanted to have a gun, but she didn't have it. And she heard people banging on the door, we're coming to get you. And so she's the one who helped lead some of the members back to their offices to help some of their interns. But to be in that height of being frightened, to be in that height where you hear people saying they're coming to get you, their motive, what they were planning on doing was hurting members of Congress for upholding our democracy. And that's what we need to understand is going on, and take real affirmative steps to make sure this never happens again, especially by making sure we convict and arrest Donald Trump.
Wow. So I'm assuming you're a proud Haitian American. What does being the first or the second Haitian American in Congress, but the first Haitian Democrat in Congress, what weight does that bring with it?
Well, it's a great experience. And I always tell people, like, growing up, you just see yourself as an American with parents who came from another country, and you're trying to figure out how to teach your family the language and the American system. But when I got into Congress, I really felt the weight on my shoulders, because that voice of immigrants who are coming across the waters, coming on planes, fleeing a democracy, really trying to have a shot at the American dream, that voice for the Haitian community has been silent. So when we talk about why we come into the country, why immigrants immigrate to the country, there's a lot of stereotypes. And we hear every day where you have Republicans say, oh, they come to sell drugs, fentanyl, do crimes, rape. That's not the reality. And so one of the first conversations that I had, my first speech on the floor, was actually thanking the members of Congress who fought for me to be here. Because if it wasn't for the rights that they allowed immigrants to come into the country and to work, I wouldn't be able to be here and have gotten an education here, have led a healthcare company here, and have even had nonprofits and organizations to really allow other people in the community to attain the American dream. And so that's what's imperative that we talk about. And I think my ability to speak on not just what Haitian Americans go through, but also Black women, African-American women, African-American men, because of my husband and my sons, our families, is really something unique that I could speak to that many other people haven't been able to.
So talk to us about your parents. When did they migrate to or immigrate to this country, and what part of Haiti is your family from?
Well, my family came here around the 60s, around Duvalier. They had to leave because they were part of people who were being educated and protesting. And after we saw so many different persecution for people who were speaking against the community and the regime, they had to move to the United States. My parents came from Okap, and my dad's family is actually Dominican. They came from the Dominican Republic and lived in Haiti. So that gave a different light to it when you see how Black people even living in the Dominican Republic are discriminated against, and you try to find shelter at home in a Black nation. And so that's when they came here, and they went to New York. And in New York, that's where we built our life. And I lived in New York in Rosedale, born in Brooklyn, raised in Rosedale, and moved here to Broward when I was 13 years old. And that's what changed the trajectory of my life. That's when I had a real opportunity at education. I joined the Urban League, and the Urban League taught me how to fill out my FAFSA. We actually did Teen Lift, where I chose the greatest college of the whole world, Howard University, shameless plug. But that was Delta Sigma Theta Teen Lift that taught me that. So those roots are so deeply embedded that it was just a combination of things that prepared me for this moment.
Wow. So your one of your parents were they were Haitian that lived in Dominican Republic, or were they Dominican Republic and moved to Haiti?
Yes, from Dominican Republic to move to Haiti.
Wow. Wow. And what part of Dominican Republic?
I can't pronounce it. We used to go to Santo Domingo every single year. My dad actually went to medical school in Santo Domingo and
Wow.
came to Haiti for a better life.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. So getting back to some of the getting back to some policy issues, what would you like to achieve within the time that you are in Congress in this particular session? What's your chief goal?
Mm-hmm. Well, right now, our biggest fight has been in housing. I've been in Congress now for 6 months, and we've been able to do take tremendous strides. We were able to allocate funding for housing. We were able to move 676 million from Treasury into our district for housing. I was also able to bring Marcia Fudge, the Secretary of HUD, into the district, into Lauderhill, so she could see for herself that we need better housing accommodations, but we also need more housing. And it was a great moment for her to actually see our children. And I always say that, I was them. When you come here and you're a child here and you're in Broward County, some of us grow up in poverty. But once you can take poverty or a person in poverty and link them to an opportunity, that person can grow and flourish. So she got a chance to see our projects. She got a chance to see some of our students, and she got a chance to see some people who made it out. And that was a great moment, because we understand that the work for housing is not just to give you shelter, but to give you a new opportunity and a legacy. So housing has been a huge issue for us, but also economic justice. When I ran, I always talked about that this is an issue for economic justice. We saw what was going on with COVID and disparities with the monies that were coming down for education, for access to vaccinations, huge disparities. And I got up and spoke and said, you know what, we can't live in a country and in a world where we see all these different states and different cities that are actually putting out stipends for $1,000 and us not requiring it on a national level. And so we fought for that. And I also fought for small businesses to make sure that they had access to any kind of financial services. So one of the proudest moments of my life actually was when we actually passed the Financial Services Economic Justice Bill, which was on the eve of Juneteenth, where I got to preside as the first Black woman serving on the district. So there's been so many things that have happened, but we're taking affirmative steps to make sure that we have economic justice, economic opportunities, and housing. Oh, and inflation. That's the third thing that we actually put a bill forward. Once we get back, we'll be voting on the gas tax. And it is a little controversial because we're trying to guarantee that that tax break actually rolls on to our constituents and American people who need it the most. Because we do see inflation when it comes to the price of groceries. We do see inflation when it comes to the price of gas and housing. So these are the places that we're fighting our hardest. But there's something else that we were able to do, which I'm proud of. As we're waiting for the People's Prosperity Plan, which is the bill for $1,000 to go through Congress, that was one of the bills that I put up first. And that bill right now is with Ways and Means, which you could think of as the budgeting committee. We were also able to fund a project. This project actually gives a stipend for housing, for groceries, for utilities. And those stipends are between $100 and $1,000. And we're proud of that it's about to go through budgeting and it'll be available for fiscal year 2023. So I keep telling everybody, choosing to run for Congress was something that I would have never chose. I never wanted to be in politics, but it was a calling. And to be able to do so much in a short amount of time really tells me that this is the right place, this is the right moment for us really to push together and push our district forward.
So, you mentioned being a congresswoman, being a calling. And, that leads me into my next question. I mean, you ran for Congress beginning in 2018, yeah. And you were not dismayed. You ran again in 2020, and you were not dismayed again, and you ran in a special election in 2022. Now, some people would say, running against someone like, Al C. Hastings, a very venerable man, respected not just for being a congressman, but his legal career was definitely a spearhead to a lot of civil rights issues in his younger days, and he's since passed away. But what gave you the fortitude to continue to challenge him in 18 and in 2020?
My Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And I have to say it like that because, I was a single mother for 12 years. And in that time, I waited to go to law school till my daughter was old enough. And I prayed that I would be in a position where I can help her. But we suffered so much trying to get childcare. We suffered so much trying to get her to develop mental needs therapy she needed. And I said to myself, I never want anyone to go through that again. So after I graduated from law school, I went into healthcare regulation, because I knew that they would tell me I didn't qualify because of federal statutes. And so I fought for healthcare equality on the federal side for more than 10 years. And after that, I promised myself and God that if you can get me through to a place where I'm successful, whatever you tell me to do, I'll do. So the first time when I ran, I did not want to run, but I wanted to be obedient. And when that didn't work, I was devastated, but I was like, oh, I dodged the bullet, like, because it was just so scary for me. The second time I was called again, and the third time I felt like I wanted to give up, but I was called for it, and it was preparation. And I realize now that it wasn't an issue that me and Alcee were running against each other, because we were never negative towards each other. If anything, I felt like his ideas and what he's done, I just extended it because I saw it differently. And I always say that we stand on the shoulders of the ones who went before us, but there's an advantage for that next generation when you could see further, especially when you incorporate technology and some of the things we have in our hands. So it was a transition process that I was being prepared for at that time. So when the opportunity came, we were the only ones who ran in the district for 3 years consecutively. So we knew the people, we knocked on the doors. One of the biggest obstacles when I ran against Alcee Hastings was everybody had a personal story. So if you understand that, that means there's 800,000 doors and you got to get in front of their faces and create a personal story. So it was preparation for this time. And when we talk about advantages, the biggest advantage that I have being in Congress is that I wasn't a former elected official. So the knowledge that I have for economics, businesses, mother, even a single mother, and just fighting through, my heart's a little different because I'm not jaded. I'm not afraid to fight for what people say is impossible. I'm not afraid to push the limits because I understand that no one should have to go through what I've been through. And that's my mission. When I get to a place where it's not for me anymore, I'll go back into nonprofits and doing healthcare. But as of right now, right here, there's a lot of work to do. And that's my goal, that no one suffers how I had to suffer with my daughter when it came to healthcare. No one had to be dismissed after working hours and being overeducated for promotions because I was a Black woman who traditionally doesn't get promoted, or not being invited onto the board because the board is full of people who don't look like me and look down at me. I wasn't qualified for loans because of all the stuff that went on to really say, we don't want you to get the loan. And so that's why I fight so hard for the community.
Wow. So, my next question is about your future election. You weathered a storm of elected officials vying for that seat, and now you're going to face one of them in an election coming up soon. How do you plan on achieving and staying in your seat to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish? Because again, you have a formidable opponent.
Mm-hmm. Well, the truth of the matter is that we were in a 11-person race, and everyone who was in the race, every elected official that was in the race has endorsed me. And they've endorsed me for this time around, except for the one who's running against me, because they said I've done the work in the 6 months. And that's because I've earned the respect. Every time I've ran, I've never said that I deserve to be there because I was successful in business or this and that. It was always about the people and the people's choice. And so we've been committed to deliver results. We've been committed to doing what we have to do. And I know a lot of the time my opponent likes to talk about negativity and all these assumptions, but the truth is there's a war right now, and the war really is about us. And once we realize that the real problem is that there's too many of us who are becoming successful, that with the funding that came down for infrastructure in our district, the people who benefited the most, who became entrepreneurs, were Black men and Black women. We saw more Black families moving forward. Once we understand that the real problem is us and our trajectory moving forward and not us fighting each other, then we understand that there's no room for negativity. Every time I talk to people in our district, I already see them being deflated, not feeling motivated. They're losing their morale. And I can't afford to have any of our citizens, any of our voters lose their morale when we're in the midst of a fight. And that fight is not between us. So that's why we always try and remind the people what we're here to do. This is a generational time. This is a destiny time where we have to fight to keep all the advances that we've made. So another enemy that we look at is inflation, because all of the financial advancements we've made, inflation is eroding all of it. And so we can't allow ourselves to be eating each other and saying all this negativity when really we have to move forward. We all have a record. And my record happens to be my business record, what we did in nonprofits, and also what I've been able to do in 6 months. And no one has been able to do that. We have a mobile office, which we go around the whole entire district 7 days a week. My opponent had an opportunity to do that when he was in county commission. We also been having we've been giving money for students who need money for school. We've given money to different organizations, doing mammograms. We've just done so much to ensure that everyone is getting an opportunity to hit the ground running. So when I look at what's going on and the different conversation, I said the proof is in the pudding. Look what we've done. 7.4 million to combat housing crisis, 2 million for job and workforce development, 9 million to improve healthcare in our community, $750,000 when it came to immigration resources, and we even did more for mental health. And the fact that Nancy Pelosi appointed me after never serving before to transportation and infrastructure within 6 months, it speaks for itself.
Thank you very much. My next question, as a lawyer, I know you must be concerned with the fact that the Southern District of Florida has had an interim U.S. attorney for a very, very, very long time. I think there's been some consensus around a potential nominee for that position. I'm speaking about Mark LaPointe, who is also a Haitian American, born and raised in Liberty City, a war veteran, 2 or 3 times over, a former U.S. attorney, assistant U.S. attorney, an outstanding lawyer in our community, and also someone who has done outstanding community work and pro bono work on behalf of some very important issues as well. Some people in the community are very frustrated with the Biden administration and his lack of putting forward adequate U.S. attorneys around this country. But we're going to talk specifically about our district, the Southern District of Florida. Why is it that our U.S. president that was elected on the backs, I will say this emphatically, on the backs of Black folk, we know it, he knows it. Why not put forward the nomination of the first African-American U.S. attorney that has gone through 2 different JNCs and has come out as a consensus candidate for position? Why isn't the White House moving this forward expeditiously?
We've had several meetings with the Congressional Black Caucus and the White House about the situation, and we believe that in the coming weeks that it's actually going to be pushed forward. And the reason why we had to meet about it, because when we took a good look, you're absolutely correct. This is a national issue. We have qualified African American people throughout the entire country who have not been pushed through the process. And so that's when it rose to the level. I mean, to me, coming in and seeing that we're still here where the appointment hasn't happened was frustrating. And I started raising my voice about it. But we're hoping that in the upcoming weeks that this will be rectified. And we have to take seriously who we have in our court system. And it shouldn't have taken Roe versus Wade for everybody now to say, wait a minute, let's look here, when we've been bringing up the issue about this appointment not being filled for now more than 3 months. So that's part of the frustration that we work so hard to get out there. But then I do understand the administration has so many things going on, but let's not forget who put you there. Let's not forget who forced their kids and their families to come out and vote. Let's not forget the people who actually rolled for this administration, because we believed with the presence of a Black woman as vice president that we would be seen for the first time and our interest would be represented. So that's really, really where we've been fighting. And we're hoping that he would actually deliver what we were told will be delivered in upcoming weeks.
Thank you. I want to double down a little bit on some conversation about our president, because, it's things that need to be said. And I just want to know what your viewpoint is. I admire President Biden for who he is and all that he has done in the past. And, but I think a lot of people are concerned going forward in the next cycle about his current performance as it relates to some issues. And I think some of them really has a lot to do with some of these appointments where we see on the other side of the aisle when they are in the White House, they have put forth appointments that, perhaps, you're just surprised that they would even offer them, but they rammed them.
Mhm.
It seemed like, is our president timid on these issues?
He is not. I can say it
Okay.
definitely. And our president has faced things that most presidents haven't. Coming out of COVID, where we saw our economy plummeting, to get to the place where he worked diligently with Congress to ensure that we have the lowest unemployment rates. Um, if you look at even this war with Ukraine, to make sure that we didn't have troops that were on the ground and that it didn't escalate to a World War III, in which Russia was trying to do, the fact that this became an economic battle, which we won over them, has never been done before. And so when we look at where we need to improve and what he's being blamed for inflation. And it's not right to put the blame on him, because if you look around the entire country and the entire world, most countries are going through the same thing. So the Republicans are using it as a tactic to say, well, he has bad policies. But let's be honest. If we look at right now who's trying to pass a tax bill that taxes the working class families and taxes us unfairly, it is our senator, which is Rick Scott. And so we have to be honest about what they're putting out there, because the alternative is terrible. The alternative is the one that had a systematic way to actually divulge and pull out and suppress Black voters. And so we have to take a good look and not allow the negative words that come in to actually bring down the morale of the administration, which has been taking affirmative steps for representation, because we've seen the most appointments of African American people within his cabinet. Do we need him to go forward? Yes. Do we need him to push harder when it comes to our community? Yes. But let's not bash him and not acknowledge all the things that he's done moving forward already. And so I'm always very careful before we start criticizing someone based off of the talking points of the Republicans, right? Because we're a family at the end of the day, and there's always going to be on the people on the outside to divide us. And as we go into midterms, as we're so close right now to pushing through legislation that we so desperately need, because if we could keep the House, if we can elect Val Demings and put more Democrats in the Senate, and we already have the presidency. You see that bill we talked about codifying Roe versus Wade? It will go through. See the bill we talked about that we passed in the House about economic justice for Black people? It would become law. Every single thing that we voted on will become law. School shootings will become law, where we actually take vote this white supremacy and how they're killing Black people and targeting us. It would be law. So this is life-changing things that will happen if we can actually keep the president there, keep Democrats in the House, and take over the Senate. So I encourage everyone, let's be focused, diligently focused, so we can get these wins. If we are able to pass this legislation, this will be the most forward movement that we've ever seen as African Americans and in this country. That's why this moment is so important, that we understand what has passed the House and what couldn't get through the Senate and what the president was waiting for.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Um, my last question before we allow you some closing words is again more on the political side rather than policy. But as a congresswoman, you have an enormous soapbox, and people are going to hear you. Things that you do or say is going to make news, positive or negative. you know, um, we have an election here in Florida for governor that has national significance. The reason why I asked you the question about Biden is because you know most of your constituents, a good portion of your constituents, support him, as do I. But we do live in Florida, and unfortunately, the party did not win this state. Uh, the past couple of times, and with what's happening with the gubernatorial race, I just want to know, where do you sit on that as far as the candidates within your own party? How do
Mhm.
you see that? How do you see them progressing to be able to, challenge the current governor?
I think that we have good candidates, but at the end of the day, we have a lot of work to do. And I say that because one of the things I always say, you know what, people tell me I talk too much and maybe I say too much, but the truth of the matter is that if we're going to have a governor who's a Democrat, you can't have it unless you're really pulling out 90%, 80% in the Black community. When we saw Andrew Gillum, when he had those numbers in some precincts, he was at 97%. And so the fact that there's not being more African American Black people being hired to push the campaign forward, the fact that we're not seeing the Florida State Party actually putting funding in to push minorities forward and to be activated, it's discouraging. And I see that the county party, the Broward County party, the Palm Beach County party has really been getting on the ground and trying to push and trying to activate and engage. But if we're going to win this, it needs to be a state revolution. It needs to be the state that comes down and says, you know what, we see you, we respect you, we will hire you, we will promote you, and we will put you in the front because we know we can't win with you not being engaged. And until the state party realizes that, acknowledges it, and starts respecting us by paying us to take a part of it, I don't think we're going to get there. So I hope we wake up very quickly and understand that this work starts now. Engagement starts now. Respect starts now. We've seen those elections, and who was the only one who was close enough to do it? It was Andrew, and that's because we carried it. And so that's where I lie. We need to get it together. Now, when you talk about the Senate, I think we're ready for it. We got to just all push together. We have Val Deming. She's excellent. You know, when I first met Val, it's like her ability to speak to you and pierce through your soul to understand the problems and to get it done. She's comparable to none. So when I look at what we have to do and the work that we have to do, it's a lot of work, but we're ready. We're fighters. We've been here before. And I tell everybody this, never feel bad about how you started. Never feel bad at what you suffered and what you went through, because how that separates you from other people, you can fight. You can fight and you can win. There's some people who never went through hardship, and you know what? They can't fight. They crumble. But we have an advantage where we could fight. We can win. We were so close. So once we recognize and wake up and understand who we are, and also have the party recognize who we are and how necessary we are to victory, I think that's when we'll have an opportunity.
Well, this has been wonderful, and you know, I hope you much success. But I want to give you the opportunity to have some closing words.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. It's always a pleasure for us to be here and have an honest discussion about where we are and how we go forward in the future, especially when our community is under attack. When we understand that we need to stand united and have one voice and not pillage ourselves or fight ourselves and engage in negative conversations, then we understand that we can only win this war by deferring to our higher selves. And that does require us to go higher when people go low. And I know sometimes we want to go even lower, but that's not how we win this moment. We don't win this moment by being reactionary. We win this moment by being proactive. We win this moment by actually electing honest people who actually can tell you what they're trying to do and what is the future trajectory. That's why I was elected. From the beginning, I said, this is never about me and my background. I've had major success, but the day when it becomes about me and not about fighting for the people who need to have doors open for them, then that's when I shouldn't be here. So I tell everyone, please come out and vote in the primary, August 23rd. We have absentee ballots that are coming out July 21st. And I even beg people even more, be cautious with your ballot, because we see that this president, this governor has this task force where they're looking for fraud, even though they know it doesn't exist. So I encourage everybody to partake and take part of the electoral process, and for everyone to actually claim their destiny moment. This is our time. Claim your destiny moment. So when we talk to our children about how we've created the Black Wall Street, that's not limited just to Wall Street, but throughout the entire nation, we could talk about our part in it. And so if everyone can claim their moment in history, everyone can claim their destiny moment, we can all retire and look back at this moment and said, we did it because we came together. We did it because we deferred to our higher selves and our higher calling. And that starts by voting on August 23rd. And I humbly ask that you support me in this election, which is August 23rd. And I can continue to represent the district that I love, the district that's been there for me when I was a single mother, the district that held me together when they said I was a failure. So I thank you again for having me, my fellow Hampton University, even though I'm Howard University, but you're still a St. Thomas University alumni. So there's always going to be that St. Thomas love. And I thank you for all your courage to have these conversations and to bring these issues to the forefront. And I look forward to working with you again.
Well, thank you very much. And no matter what they say about Howard University, I'm going to push, I'm going to tell them, Congresswoman Sheila Cherfilus-McCormick is the exception. In all seriousness, we kid about Howard and Hampton, but it's really nothing but all love. And I want to thank our listeners for watching us. I hope they enjoyed their lunch today. And I look forward to seeing everyone next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.